Welcome. We're going to talk about how you can help your brain help you, specifically with using neurofeedback or brain training. Okay, so we have a form of neurofeedback called default network training. Default network is sort of an idling state. I like to say auto-relating state. It's the one where we're sort of just thinking about ourselves, relating inwards, not solving problems in the environment and so forth. So DNT, default network training, is a way to normalize brain areas. We do an assessment with the brain, we get a brain map, and can see what's the immature brain areas, and we target those, get them hooked into the neocortex, not so controlled by the primitive part of the brain, the limbic area. And how's this neurofeedback done? By watching movies. We're actually going to be training your pre-conscious. Your conscious system will be just watching the movie, and the screen will shrink. Sometimes the volume will shrink, and that's how we do what's called operant conditioning to reward brain activity that we want. But you'll know you're doing it, but it's actually at a pre-conscious level. And we nudge the brain by when the screen shrinks or the sound shrinks, it's harder to follow the story, the movie, or whatever you're watching, and your brain, this part of the brain picks up that cue and change goes in that direction we want it to, and that's how we help uh, heal areas, restore connections, and so forth. Okay, so here's just a way to look at it. So I'm looking at screen size. You can see it will shrink. When we want the neocortex in charge, this system. We don't want the primitive system. This thing gets mature early in life. So this is the thing that gives us this sort of very basic instincts and so forth. We don't want those instincts driving the show. We want reason to drive the show, thought process. So whenever we get in this, let's say we're training that site, these things are piercing through, it shrinks. And whenever we get what we want, it maximizes in that area. Those whatever we're training, that tissue learns, and you get learning curve to higher and higher rates. So we train that habit. Okay. So what we've learned is the most people, most adults in particular, actually put too much blood flow in the neocortex. So the limbic system gets starved. They're constantly putting blood flow, and that is not efficient. You got to be sort of in sync with your environment. Well, the sensory system is how we get in sync. And sensory, when we see this is an idling rhythm of the brain. It means the blood flow is in the subcortex, feeding the limbic areas when they need to be fed, and then we minimize these because the neocortex is 10 times bigger. It can just hoard all the resources. So we minimize. When you see delta, the person just inside their own thinking, sort of like a divine state where you just sort of everything's what you expect. You assume nothing in the environment you need to be aware of. But when you see the alpha, it's like you're attuning to the environment. Beta it's more work. It's the sensory information, but it's actually sampling twice per sample interval. Okay, so this default network training. The default network is specific areas very related to our maternal and paternal behaviors, our relationships with our parents or people who serve those roles. It has one of the things deals with looks at symbols, deals with letting in agency. I like to call it our shields, symbols and shields. Those in the parietal, and there's some memory areas that are in this default network that deals with just you thinking about yourself or projecting on the future, but not really acting on the environment. Well, that's the first network. We call it default network training, but we train all the networks. That just has to be, that's just the most important one. And we often start with that if there's problems in it. Okay. Well, like I said earlier, overthinking is a common problem. Get excessive neocortical blood flow, get detached. Actually, delta's actually detached in the sensory world, just sort of, in your own head. And sometimes working too hard, trying to solve things, like Sherlock over here. Okay. So we reduce this overthinking, and by just training it, it's like training the brain to chill, to just let the blood flow go where it needs to go. It doesn't have to hoard it in the neocortex. Get the limbic system strong and secure. And there's been studies, and they find gray matter and white matter. This one's very beautiful because the white matter is right between the two electrodes that they train F4 and P4, increasing that white matter. And this isn't healthy people. some gray matter. Gray matter is very interesting. Gray matter improvements are a whole science in the future to figure out, how these things work, because sort of the activity increases the gray matter, the myelin, but this is more the governing systems, and those are kind of interesting. Okay, and there's Jared and Madison. They were very young. Okay, so we get success. So we don't want orange in this measure. This is a measure of like functional transparency. How much is the neocortex has turned into a matrix so they can take the primitive brain and repurpose it in important ways, and not just let it all the way through. Well, when we see orange, that means it's like letting it all through like a window. It's just letting that primitive brain finalize the thought processes going through there. And this is the planning functions, and this is social emotional elements. And this is after training. You can see we want green and light blue's fine. It just means a little bit more thoughts going on here. You see this improvement that happens. And this is like for instance, this thing here, you have a singlet orange, that means hyperconnected. They see this in fMRI data too. It's like your 5-year-old mind's in charge, and that means unfortunately it tries to control too much and doesn't let in the reward that's out there in the world. Here's another example. This is the front of the head. We divided things into thirds, and we look up close. And again, we don't want orange, and you can see the improvements. So some blue, some work. And here, these things are easy to solve. Just put in blood flow there, put electrodes above them. Okay, here's this I think is maybe the previous case, but here's another one where we had the singlets. And the work's not done, but it's getting there. So we do a brain map. So everything is personalized to the individual. We figure out what's going on in your head in terms of what areas are still being what we call relational, still being the limbics in charge. And these relational sites, these orange sites, are sometimes part of your profession when you get really, because it shows it's what you think is very important. But we need to chill that out at some level. You want to be flexible so that sometimes you're like, okay, if you're into math, oh, that's very important, but you don't have to talk about math all the time and other things. And this is sometimes professions, it's even helpful to be limbic there, but we can chill it out and people don't lose their talents. So orange areas is what we are really targeting. We know how to fix these areas from a few thousand cases. And I mean, they do fix by just watching movies in essence. So when you see yellow there, it means things, it's like a water. It's not a matrix yet. So that we're seeing really like the limbic system below is just shooting through like a pane of glass, like I said. And then you get opaqueness, and usually it actually jumps from this measure to this measure. So it's sort of more functional. It has structural elements to it, but then we want that balance point. And so when we see the orange, that's relational thinking. We think we're the center of everything about us, what we think. We think everything's happening for us. And it's like a dog that hears a car horn honk and starts barking back. It's thinking the car horn is for it, and it's not. And so that's a lot of wasted energy being relational thinking all the time, because things are mostly independent of us. And that's the other mode of understanding the world. But we have some balance. Like when we're driving our car, we're not going to think everything's independent. Things are responding to us. So we have to be in a balance point. We have these neuromarkers. We know when someone suffers psychological trauma, the posterior cingulate, this area, the orange areas will disconnect, and self-nurture declines, it's lost in disconnection. We know how to fix this, kind of like electricians. We know once we see where the wiring problems are, we repair them. fMRI has found the same thing with the this reduction of coordination or connectivity with the posterior cingulate when it comes to trauma. We just do it much less expensively and more accurately. Other neuromarkers include when this one's in disarray, this deals with two-dimensional, three-dimensional space, and you can get distractibility, even dyslexia, social media addiction, vulnerability. This is suicidality marker often. It's about being recruitable, too recruitable, not having enough buffers to the world, to others. Recruitability means like people asking you to do things, and just every time try to give it your attention, answer this email, respond to this call. To the extreme examples, like take me to the airport, do this for me, do that for me. So when these are messed up, you get aggression inwards, suicidality, self-harm, and sometimes aggression outwards. Okay, and okay, when these, you got that going on and you have some verbal or physical stressors, you can get panic. This will activate deep in the brain here and activate the paractoductal gray on the left side, cause you to go into shock or panic. But we can fix that. And here, anxiety, temporal poles help govern the amygdalas, and we have fight or flight. And this is where flight and fight, we can see how much there is of that. And when it's orange, it's a lot. Stress over here, physical, verbal, on the right side, social, emotional. Depression on inside the head here, area 9 is where we energize the brain. So if that gets like a lesion, there'd be apathy, lack of motivation. Well, you can get lack of motivation functionally, and we can see it. If it's on one side, left side, usually it's a little bit more cyclical. Right side, it's more about self-soothing issues. And we target these as well. This is looking at a loner spot over here, 44R, when it's yellow like that. And anger, 38R, that's the rage amygdala, and the fear amygdala over here, and the rage is not being governed well. Well, and all you have to do is just watch movies, and the neurofeedback will help restore those areas that were orange. They'll head them towards the green and allow the individual to have more flexibility in their functioning. And we know where to put the electrodes. This is some examples where we put them to calm, motivate, relax. And so schedule an appointment. If you got some issue that brain training can help, it can help a great many things. So we do brain maps, start off, then we do the neurofeedback. We also have a forum where we train 2 people at the same time. And there's our website. And so support your brain, and your brain supports you. All right. Thank you very much.